Nintendo has had a large variety of launch titles for their consoles and handhelds, so I figured we'd piece together the best and the worst. I'll only be talking about Nintendo-developed launch games, so no third parties. We'll be basing this list off the impact they had as well as how fun the games are. And with that said, let's get her ranked. 43. Donkey Kong Jr. Math. Do you enjoy solving math problems in the most long-winded way possible? This game may be up your alley then, because all you do is solve math problems like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, because that is what video games are for. 42. 1-2 Switch. I can barely even qualify this as a game. This overpriced piece of junk comes with 28 different minigames. Most of them you play once and you'll never want to play them again. Some of the minigames do highlight the features of the Joy-Cons well, but this should have come bundled with the Switch. It's one of the most forgettable titles of all time. 41. Stack Up. This was one of the two games that worked with Rob the Robot. All you're really doing is having Rob move some colored blocks from place to place. And you can't even play this game if you don't have Rob. It's a cool concept, but that's about it. 40. Baseball Game Boy. Baseball games were fairly common back in the 80s, and this one is no different. It's a very primitive way to play baseball, and it has Mario in it for some reason. I'll be the first to say it, this feels like a cheap Tiger Electronics game. 39. Baseball NES. Like the Game Boy title, Nintendo used to make really basic sports games like this one. This baseball game isn't that bad for the time, but you might as well just play a modern sports game. 38. Gyromite. This is the second Rob the Robot game, and it's a bit better than Stack Up. Rob moves certain platforms up and down, and you have to navigate your way through the maze. Again, this is a novel idea, but it's not the most practical game out there. 37. Tennis NES. I won't lie, I had more fun with NES Tennis than I thought I would. The controls are somewhat smooth, and it's pretty easy to keep track of the ball. Yeah, that's kind of a big deal for hardware that's so old. Like with baseball though, you're better off playing a modern tennis game. 36. Tennis Game Boy. The best part of this game is the title screen says, music yes. I don't know, something about that cracks me up. This plays almost exactly the same as tennis on the NES. These two games could be interchanged. 35. Ice Climber. This NES classic has a great theme. Simply climb up to the top of the mountain. The music is catchy and I love the aesthetic, but the control is horrible. Trying to move in the air after jumping is very finicky and not fluid at all. Honestly, I'd love to see this game get recreated like Kid Icarus did on the 3DS. 34. Hogan's Alley. This is about as simple as an NES Zapper game can get. There's 3 targets and you have to shoot the bad guys. It's fun, but there's not much meat on it. 33. Wild Gunman. Like Hogan's Alley, you just have to shoot the bad guy and you move on. This one is a bit more interesting as it's presented like a western where you have to fire after he says draw. 32. Duck Hunt. Definitely the most memorable of the Zapper games. You go through rounds and have to shoot birds or discs. The Duck Hunt dog is kind of a dick when you miss your shots, but it adds a lot of charm that the other Zapper titles don't really have. 31. Mario's Tennis. So the first Mario Tennis game was actually on the Virtual Boy. It's not the worst game of all time, but it's pretty barren with futures. You can't play tennis with a few different Mario characters, you can do a tournament, and play in singles or doubles. But that's really it. It's pretty disappointing the Virtual Boy didn't launch with a normal Mario game. 30. Pilotwings. To show off the power of the SNES, Pilotwings has you either skydiving or landing a plane. It's a neat little game with tasty tunes, but also has no real depth. For what it is, I guess it's fine. 29. Kung Fu. Here we have a very simple beat 'em up. You go around punching or kicking a bunch of enemies. There's not much to it, but there is a satisfying pow to each hit. It's annoying when you miss your aim and kind of get stuck on a few enemies at once, but for one of the first beat 'em ups, it's not too bad. 28. Clue Clue Land. You're gonna need a clue to understand this one. You play as this red blob, going around poles trying to find treasure. You also have to be careful of these blue spiky Yanuras, and this is, I don't know, it's just the weirdest game ever. It's enjoyable, I'll give it that, just really, really weird. 27. Pinball. The name speaks for itself. You play pinball and try to score the most points before getting a game over. The board has a bunch of ways to nab points, but it also looks kind of bland. But you can't knock it too much since this is NES after all. 26. Teleroboxer. It's one of the better Virtual Boy titles. Teleroboxer is a boxing game that's in the first-person perspective, and it's actually not too bad. It kind of shows off the Virtual Boy's capabilities, but it also shows off its flaws. This game would have benefited so much with more colors. 25. Golf. It's a lot better than you would expect. You simply play games of golf, and have to use a swing meter to measure your power and direction. I like the screen on the left as it better illustrates what's happening, and you can swap clubs on the fly, giving you lots of freedom. 24. Nintendogs and Cats. If you played the original Nintendogs, this game is very similar in nature. You can still pet, feed, bathe, walk, and take your pups to competitions. It's one of those games that you play for a few minutes a day, and you can buy cats as a bonus. The novelty has worn off though, and seems silly to reintroduce this as a launch game. 23. Excitebike. For a motorbike game from the 80s, Excitebike can be quite exciting. You'll drive up and down loads of ramps, and the challenge is keeping your speed by angling your bike correctly in the air. You can even make your own tracks, which is pretty slick for an NES title. 22. Mach Rider. I have to start by saying that the music absolutely slaps. You don't expect it to be so catchy. This is another motorbike game, but you also shoot invaders at the same time. It doesn't even seem like this should work on the NES. It's really quite impressive. 21. Alleyway, or Arkanoid featuring Mario for some reason. This is the perfect game for Game Boy, and while it's not one of the best launch titles, this is still really solid. Alleyway is a game you play for 15 minutes, have a blast, and then set it back down. 20. Steel Diver. One of the biggest oddballs Nintendo ever launched a system with. This is a submarine game entirely controlled by the touchscreen. The presentation and graphics are pretty lackluster, but the gameplay is surprisingly solid. You can fire missiles, take down other submarines, camouflage briefly, and move all at once, and it can be quite a joy to play. 19. Game & Watch Gallery 2. This is another pretty obscure series. The Game & Watch Gallery is a collection of really old Game & Watch games. These simple yet fun mini-games mesh perfectly with the Game Boy Color, and you can play the classic and modern versions of each. 18. Pilotwings 64. The sequel to Pilotwings was a decent game for launch. You can hang glide, use a rocket jet, skydive, and much more. Pilotwings really is more of a flight simulator than a game, but it has this really nice relaxing vibe. 17. Wrecking Crew. Mario has had so many jobs, but everyone seems to forget he was a construction worker. Well, a worker gone wild, I guess. You swing your hammer at rocks and doors to destroy them without getting attacked by other enemies. It's way more enjoyable than you'd think. 16. F-Zero. That's right, this came out before Super Mario Kart did. It's too bad it's been left behind as an IP because the futuristic racing is loads of fun. This game utilized Mode 7 graphics, has slapping music, and still controls pretty well to this day. Also Nintendo, we're still waiting for that new F-Zero. Any day now, any day would be nice. 15. Nintendo Land. This was Nintendo's unofficial sequel to Wii Sports. Some of the games are loads of fun like Mario Chase, Luigi's Ghost Mansion, and Metroid Blast. But then the other ones just kind of exist, or they can only be played with one person. The overall package is fine for showing off the Wii U gamepad, but it sucks that not every game is single player and multiplayer compatible. 14. New Super Mario Bros. U. So this 2D Mario isn't really a bad game. In fact, I'd say it's one of the best new Super Mario Bros. Titles. The thing is that it came out at a time where this series was going through fatigue, and as a launch game for the Wii U, it didn't make much of an impact. It's still a lot of fun though, and the Luigi U expansion was a nice treat. 13. Super Mario Advance. So instead of a brand new Mario game, the GBA had the Super Mario Advance series. This launch title was a recreation of Super Mario Bros. 2 from the NES. The remake makes the game much easier, and overall a more fun experience, and they even threw in Mario Bros. Just for the heck of it. 12. Metroid Prime Hunter's First Hunt. I must have played this demo hundreds of times when I first got a DS. While it's only a few minutes long, just seeing a 3D Metroid on this tiny handheld was a landmark achievement. The controls aren't perfect, but they function well for what it is. First Hunt is a short and sweet package. 11. Super Mario 64 DS. While I'm not a fan of the controls in Mario 64 DS, they did as much as they could with the D-pad, and this port still retains the entirety of the N64 classic, plus several more stars and worlds to explore. And you can play as 4 different characters, all with different attributes. For a remake, it really pushes the envelope. 10. Wii Sports. While technically a demo, if you were alive in the 2000s, then your family probably owned a Wii and Wii Sports. There's 5 different sports you can play either in single or multiplayer, and it shows off the capabilities of the Wiimote really well. While the motion controls are really basic, this game is still a blast to play. 9. Luigi's Mansion. Yeah, Mario Sunshine wasn't the launch game, but instead we get this gem. Luigi's Mansion has you playing as Luigi, and Professor Egad forces him to suck up ghosts to save his brother Mario. This is one of the first games to give charm and character to the Mario franchise, and the idea of sucking up ghosts and treasure is a pretty awesome concept. 8. Super Mario Land. Here we have a Mario game where Bowser isn't the bad guy, and you don't save Peach, and there's no Fire Flower, but it's still a wonderful time. Super Mario Land is very short, but the levels are so creative, the music is infectious, and you get to fly in a spaceship. 7. The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. Without a doubt, one of the biggest launch games of all time. Twilight Princess was the return to a darker and grittier Zelda game, and people bought a Wii just to play this, and it still holds up pretty well. I wouldn't say it's the best Zelda ever, but it has a unique identity as the most edgy one in the franchise. 6. Super Mario World. There's not much better you can do with a launch game than have it be a successor to Super Mario Bros. 3. Mario World looks better, has more worlds, introduces Yoshi, there's new power-ups, and an even more expansive world map. That is how you launch a console. 5. Super Mario Bros. While the original Super Mario Bros. Hasn't aged the best, it is one of the most important games of all time. It single-handedly saved the video game industry and introduced us to one of the most recognizable characters of all time. Yes, there was the Donkey Kong arcade machine, but Super Mario Bros. Is when Mario really shined. 4. Tetris. What more can be said about Tetris? This game is so good that people, including myself, continue to buy it over and over on multiple different consoles. Tetris 99 does have a lot of bells and whistles, but the same addicting gameplay is still featured on the Game Boy. 3. Tetris DX. There's not much I can really add, except that it's Tetris in color. That's really the only big difference, and it also doesn't have the classic Tetris music for some reason. For that alone, the Game Boy one may be considered better, but that's up to interpretation. The gameplay is still as addicting as it can be. 2. Super Mario 64. I know, I have Mario 64 bias, but can you blame me? Mario 64 revolutionized 3D gaming to what it is today, and it's still a pretty fun game after all these years. It helped create dozens of new 3D platformers and pioneered the way to a more modern gaming life. 1. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Nintendo really struggled in the Wii U era, but the Switch and Breath of the Wild has put them back on the forefront. This game is a revolution to the NES Zelda, since it's completely open world and explodes with places to visit and discover. It's so easy to get lost in this game for dozens or even hundreds of hours. Breath of the Wild is truly a magical experience. Well, that was a lot of games to go through. It was pretty cool learning which Nintendo IP were developed by third parties as launch games and just how many first-party NES launch titles there are. And that is about all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks a bunch for watching. I'll see you all next time.